He walked in holding his daughter's tiny hand, unaware that she would say something that would leave the interviewer in silent tears. And when she did, the whole room froze, including the man who had once shut doors on fathers like him. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, comment, share with someone who needs hope today. Subscribe our channel Kindness Talks for more real-life inspired emotional stories. The morning was cold, not because of the weather, but because the heater in the apartment had stopped working 3 days ago. Daniel Brooks, a 33-year-old single father, buttoned up his worn-out shirt and looked at his reflection in the cracked mirror. His tie was outdated, but he tied it with care. Sitting on the mattress behind him was his 6-year-old daughter, Ella, holding her bunny-eared notebook like a treasure chest. "Daddy, can I come with you today?" she asked softly. Daniel froze. It was the most important job interview he had landed in over a year, and the thought of showing up with his daughter in tow made his stomach twist in uncertainty. But the daycare had canceled last minute, and he couldn't ask for favors anymore. They'd run out of people willing to help. Daniel looked at Ella's hopeful eyes. She had been his world ever since her mother passed away in a tragic car accident 3 years ago. The grief never truly left either of them. They lived paycheck to paycheck, scraping by on temp jobs and his own pride. Today's interview was at Marlowe and Pierce Architects, a firm so reputable it seemed out of his league. Still, he had to try. He wiped Ella's face with a warm cloth, packed a peanut butter sandwich in her tiny lunchbox, and held her hand as they boarded the bus. It was a long ride, filled with stares from suited commuters and the occasional whisper. But Daniel didn't care. He had promised Ella that life would get better, and this job was the promise he needed to keep. They reached the building 20 minutes early. It was massive, glass doors, marble floors, and sharp-suited professionals who walked like they owned the future. Daniel adjusted his tie one last time and told Ella, "We'll just sit in the corner, quiet as mice, okay?" She nodded, clutching her bunny notebook tightly. When they entered the waiting lounge, the receptionist raised an eyebrow at the child but said nothing. A few minutes later, Mr. Harrison, the senior interviewer and one of the founding partners, called Daniel's name. Daniel stood up and began walking toward the door when Ella slipped her hand into his. He hesitated. Should he ask her to stay behind? But her grip tightened. "It's okay," he whispered to her. "Just sit quietly next to me." Harrison looked confused but allowed them both in. The room was filled with glass tables, steel chairs, and the scent of freshly brewed coffee. Daniel felt underdressed, underqualified, and overwhelmed. Still, he sat down with as much poise as he could muster, while Ella sat beside him silently, drawing something in her notebook. The interview began. Questions about experience, qualifications, gaps in employment. Daniel answered honestly. He had taken time off after his wife's death, worked small jobs, and cared for his daughter full-time. Harrison's eyes narrowed at the mention of full-time single dad. "You've got a pretty big gap in your career, Mr. Brooks." "That's a concern," Harrison said, scribbling something. "I understand," Daniel replied, trying to keep his voice calm. "But I've learned to manage time, multitask, and handle emergencies better than any project manager I've worked with." Before Harrison could speak again, a small voice piped up. "Daddy fixed the leaking roof with just a trash bag and glue," Ella said without looking up. "And when my bunny's leg tore, he stitched it with thread from a sock." There was a long pause. Daniel flushed. "I'm sorry, she." But Harrison didn't speak. He just stared at the little girl, something shifting in his expression. Ella looked up then and said, he never cries in front of me. But sometimes at night, I hear him talk to Mommy's photo. He says he hopes I don't see how scared he is." Daniel's breath caught. He turned to his daughter in shock. The room fell into an aching silence. Harrison blinked. Then slowly stood up. He walked to the window and just stared outside. His hands trembled slightly. Finally, he turned around and said, "Mr. Brooks, I'll be honest. I had made up my mind before you even walked in. I thought people with messy lives don't belong in buildings like this. But that little girl, she just reminded me of something I forgot long ago. There was something different about the air in the room now, less corporate, more human." Harrison walked to his desk, picked up a frame, and placed it face down without a word. Daniel noticed the subtle tremble in his fingers, the way his jaw clenched as though holding back something heavy. "I had a daughter," Harrison finally said, sitting down again. "Her name was Ivy. She used to sit under my desk when I worked weekends here. Called this office her castle. She passed away 10 years ago, cancer." He looked up at Ella with soft eyes. She had the same bravery. The same way of speaking truth without shame. Daniel didn't know what to say. He reached out instinctively and placed his hand gently over Ella's, as if shielding her from the weight of the moment. "I shut a lot of doors after she died," Harrison continued. "Doors to people, to empathy, to stories like yours. I believed that only those who walked a straight, uninterrupted path could belong here. But your daughter reminded me that the strongest foundations are built on cracks that held." Daniel felt tears sting his eyes, but he blinked them away. He had cried too many times in the dark. "Not here. Not now." "You're hired," Harrison said, quietly but firmly. Daniel looked up, stunned. "What?" "You're hired. Full-time. You start Monday. Salary will be standard for mid-level, with benefits. We'll figure out flexible hours. And we'll talk about promotion once you prove yourself, which I already think you will." Ella squealed softly, holding her daddy's arm tighter. Daniel turned to her, whispering, "We did it, baby." But Harrison wasn't done. He reached into a drawer and pulled out a thick envelope. "There's a daycare we partner with. I want you to enroll her today. The first 6 months, on me." Daniel didn't respond. He simply placed his hand on his face and cried, silent but deep sobs that years of exhaustion had built up. Ella hugged his side, smiling as though she knew her dad's world had just changed forever. The room was quiet, but the silence was sacred, not awkward. On the way out, Ella tugged Harrison's sleeve. "Thank you for giving my daddy a chance." Harrison knelt down to meet her eyes and whispered, "Thank you for giving me mine back." As the two walked out, the receptionist watched them, stunned. Word spread around the firm that the strictest partner had cried during an interview, and had hired a man with holes in his resume and a child by his side. But none of them knew what Harrison had written in his journal that night. "Today, a little girl reminded me what buildings are really about. Not just concrete, but courage. Not just steel, but stories." And for Daniel and Ella, the world wasn't just a little warmer that day, it finally felt like home.